You know, I am really jealous of little kids sometimes. They can look at the world in wide-eyed wonder and amazement. They can find fascination with the things that I see as ordinary and boring. They can see an abundance of beauty where I only see brokenness. But of course, with my jealousy comes sadness too, because I know that they too will begin to see brokenness in the world as they grow into adolescence and beyond, as the jigsaw puzzle of life breaks into pieces. As adults, some of us sit in our shame among the pieces or shards of life, just trying to survive. Others of us break the broken pieces into smaller and smaller pieces, while still others of us begin to pick up a piece here and a piece there, fitting them back together in a slow process of restoration. Trying to make peace with that shadow side of ourselves, trying to make peace with that place of shame that makes us cringe at the simple thought of other people seeing it. It's in this place of shame where our gospel reading begins. It begins with Peter wrestling with his shame on the fishing boat, the very same Peter who was called the rock, Peter, the fisher of people, the one who proclaimed Jesus as the Son of God before any other disciples dared to. Peter, who walked on water, who saw Jesus transfigured on a mountaintop. Peter, who promised to stay by Jesus' side even unto death. It was this Peter who failed in courage so catastrophically while gathered around a charcoal fire on the night Jesus was arrested that he was running from the memory of this conversation. Hey, I saw you with Jesus. You must be one of his followers. No, I'm not. I swear, I don't even know the man. It is this Peter we find sitting among the shards of life, grasping at the familiar, retreating to something, anything that makes him feel competent and worthy, trying to return to a time or place in his life where shame is not, where his wound is not, where Jesus is not. Yet, as much as Peter tries to run away from that time and place of shame, it's in this shadowed place, this place of brokenness, where Jesus shows up and invites the disciples to once again gather around a meal. And it's in this time of fellowship, gathered around a charcoal fire, where Jesus asks Peter 3 times if Peter loves him, calling us back to that other charcoal fire where Peter was asked 3 times about his relationship to Jesus and denied even knowing Jesus all 3 times. And so it's gathered around this charcoal fire in this story that we get 3 times Jesus' question, Peter, do you really love me? And Peter's 3 replies, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. To which Jesus responds 3 times, feed my sheep. It's gathered around this charcoal fire in this story that we see how much Peter is still wrestling and caught up in his own grief and pain and frustration at himself and his actions on the night that Jesus was betrayed. It's gathered around this charcoal fire that we find Peter sitting amongst the broken shards of his life, returning to the familiar patterns of fishing, just trying to survive. It's gathered around this charcoal fire that we find Peter full of shame and feeling as if he will never be able to forgive himself. Yet it's also gathered around this charcoal fire where Jesus reaffirms Peter 3 times. It's also gathered around this charcoal fire where Jesus hands Peter the pieces to put back together and start the slow process of restoration. It is also gathered around this charcoal fire in this grace-filled moment that Peter realizes that Jesus has already forgiven him and finally gives himself permission to forgive himself. Therefore, picking up the pieces and becoming an undisputed leader in the new movement that is Christianity. And what's so beautiful about this moment is that Jesus's affirmation, his affirmation of Peter and his affirmation of us, and the beauty in our brokenness. We live in a society obsessed with perfection, yet from the very beginning, this church that we all belong to has been built on piecing back together the messiness and brokenness of life. As the pieces come together like a jigsaw puzzle that's been around for a while, subject to pets and children and vacuum cleaners, we know that this restoration will be imperfect, with missing, bent, or broken pieces. We can't see the lid of the jigsaw puzzle to see what the perfectly completed whole picture is supposed to look like, so we do our best to faithfully map out a picture. There's a Japanese art form called kintsugi, which is literally golden repair, that celebrates damage or breakage of pottery by repairing it with special glue that is dusted or mixed with gold, silver, or platinum. Therefore, making the restoration more beautiful than the original, precisely because of, rather than despite, its repaired brokenness. We live in a world where breakage and repair are normal parts of human life, but rather than denying or hiding these faults and failures, we're called to embrace these imperfections, our imperfections. Our imperfect restoration brings beauty to treasure and honor, not disregard. Because it's through Jesus's death and resurrection that we're brought into a new life. And just as kintsugi brings a new newness to broken pottery, our shame meets the grace of Jesus, and Jesus's grace wins every time, bringing beauty to our brokenness like a gold-dusted piece of repaired pottery. Amen.